What's up, everybody? Garrett back here, and I'm back to do my new Rad 9, the community challenge from the Radpack. The 9 movies that made us was our first community challenge, and it blew up. People were involved. I was getting tagged on Instagram. I was getting tagged on YouTube. It was amazing. And how do we top this? Well, it's Halloween, and we want to know which 9 movies scared you growing up. Now, when we decided to do this list, we want to know which movies kind of freaked you out. It could have been as a kid. It could have been a cartoon. It could have been a TV show. It could have been as a teenager. It could be now. We want to know movies that kind of freaked you out growing up and make a list of 9 movies that really affected you. Now, again, my list here is kind of like the Wild West. As a big horror fan, you become slightly desensitized to a lot of things. So a lot of these movies here are movies that I saw more at a young age. So maybe movies that you wouldn't expect to be on this list. It's actually some TV show episodes that are on here as well. Because again, as a kid, some of these things gave me nightmares, and it's not what you may think. So Mel dropped her video yesterday. I haven't watched it yet because I didn't want it to persuade my list, but I know she probably did an honorable mentions because last time she didn't, everybody else did, and she was bummed out. So I'm almost positive she probably did an honorable mentions list this time around. So I made a small honorable mention list of movies that could have made this list, but for whatever reason, just didn't. Now, the first one is going to be The Exorcist. This is probably one that's on most people's list that are going to do this challenge. But the reason this one did not make the cut is because my first time seeing this was in the year 2000. This was a movie that was really talked up by my uncle for a long time as the scariest movie ever made. He was definitely afraid of it as a kid. He still has a hard time watching this movie, and he's a huge horror fan. So this was built up to be like the most scary thing I had ever seen. And when I saw this, I was freaked out. But again, being like a late teen, you try to act cool and be like, oh, that was fine. But honestly, it was effective. I remember showing my brother, and he was kind of like, oh yeah, that was weird. Like, I could tell he was a little bit affected by this movie too. And even just watching this 4K, one of the scenes that really kind of makes me turn my head is that scene when she has the needle in her neck and they're doing all those tests on her in the hospital. Like, that's a rough scene for me to watch. It's freaky. It's just so raw. And I don't know. I just think that The Exorcist is one that deserves to be mentioned, even though it did not make my top 9. Now, again, the next one on my list is a post-2000s horror movie, and this is one that I think is a super effective movie, and that is a movie called The Descent. Super creepy. I can remember seeing this with some friends, and one of our friends was like screaming the whole time. Like, he thought this was like the scariest movie ever. Super creepy movie, very original. The one parts about this that really kind of creeps me out is when they're in those caves. Like, I think I'm definitely claustrophobic. I've never been in a situation like that, but just looking at that just makes my skin crawl. So I have a hard time with those scenes. And even the monsters here, pretty creepy, being blind and stuff like that. So this is a really, really creepy movie, and it definitely affected me when I saw this in my early 20s. Next one on my honorable mentions list is going to be Paranormal Activity, the first one. My favorite's part 3, but when this did come out, this was really creepy of a movie. There's 3 movies that creep me out. Possession movies, found footage movies, and alien movies. For some reason, those just hit me the hardest when it comes to just freaking me out. Like slasher movies, gore, that stuff doesn't really affect me when it comes to being scared or freaked out or creeped out, but found footage movies, alien movies, and possession movies do give me a little bit of an uneasy feeling. And this one, I think, was pretty damn effective when it first came out. I can remember coming home and like looking around the house and being like, was that shoe on the floor before I left? Was this off the chair? Like, I was looking around because it was pretty effective. So I'm going to give some props to the original Paranormal Activity, because when this came out, as much as it was something that we've kind of seen before, it was just done in a little bit of a different way in the home and stuff like that. So you just kind of felt like anything could happen to anybody, even when you're in the comfort of your own home. The last one I'm going to show on my list is one that I don't find this scary now at all, but as a young kid and showed this at a very, very young age, my uncle, I was pretty creeped out by not one, but 2 scenes. And that is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The one scene I saw as a very, very young kid that freaked me out and I thought about for a long time was he showed me this movie, and I remember when the hitchhiker got into the van and he was like cutting himself, and they called him Dracula. And then my dad came in the room and basically was like, shut this off. So for years, that was shut off. And all I kept thinking in my head was Dracula was in the back of this van cutting people and cutting himself. Like, I was so confused as a little kid, and in my head, I thought that was supposed to be Dracula that was in the back of that van. But again, I only remember seeing that scene up to that point when he started cutting himself, and then my dad came in and was like, take this off. But being my uncle's favorite movie, a couple of years later, he showed me a little bit more of this movie. I was a little bit older, but that scene where Leatherface just opens that door, I was like sitting there like this. Like that, it just came, boom, and went. Like it didn't feel like I was ready for that. It didn't feel like that was what was to come. It just kind of happened, and that stuck with me for a long time. And I always, always, always just love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, especially because those two scenes really hit me hard as a young kid. It's one thing that I'll never forget, and this is still one of my favorite movies of all time. But again, now I'm not too affected by it, but it is one that I absolutely love. I was only 4. I could be here all night talking movies that affected me growing up. Even like kids shows and kids movies really affected me as a young kid. But again, I've got to get this thing going. I got to get to my Rad 9. And like I said, any one of these could have made this list. I could have flipped a bunch of these out, but these are the ones that I chose because I thought there was just a lot of different elements in here that I can talk about. So number 1, and to be honest, this might be the movie that scares me the most, and that is The Blair Witch Project. Now, there's something about this movie, I can't even explain it. Like I said, found footage is one of the things that really creeps me out. So I remember this thing getting built up as it was real life footage. I mean, this found footage thing was something I'd never really seen up until this point. I was watching horror when this came out. I just never seen anything like this one. And I remember going on a double date to see this in 1999 and kind of acting really cool at the end. Like, what was that? That was cheesy. That wasn't scary. That wasn't, movies I was used to. But man, the thing about this was for days and days and days, it was just stuck in my brain, especially that end scene, seeing him in the corner like that. That was just stuck with me for so long. And I'm telling you, ever since that day that I saw that in the theaters, I've had a very tough time watching this movie. I've gone back to it a bunch of times to watch it, and I still get chills up and down my back at certain scenes. It's the one where they're in the tent and all the kids are like banging on it. It's that whole end scene in the house of her running up and down the stairs screaming. There's something about this movie that just freaks me out. And as much as people want to kind of shit on the sequel, not the sequel that came out after this, but like that newer one that came out, Blair Witch, that was supposed to take place kind of right after this one, you could say what you want, but when they get into that house at the end again, I had similar feelings than I did back in 1999. It still was creepy to me. It was like I felt like I was back in that situation that I didn't want to be in. And I have to give it props on that. If you have not seen that one and you're just like, oh, it was some kind of weird remake or whatever, it's not bad. It's actually a pretty good follow-up to this. And there are some pretty creepy moments as well in that movie. The difference is that we know that it's a movie now, where when this one came out, we were really kind of almost told this was real footage. So I would highly recommend going to check that one out, because the ending on that still gives me similar feelings as this, but I don't think anything is going to make me feel the way that Blair Witch does. All right, now this is an interesting one. This is not a movie I've really talked about on my channel at all. This came out in 1984. I saw this as a kid. I believe I saw this. I either rented it or saw it on TV. But I'm going to tell you that there's a scene in this movie, or a couple scenes in this movie, that if you were a young kid and seen this in the 80s, I guarantee this freaked you out. And it's one that I need to go back to. It's been years since I've seen this, and it's a real cool movie. And I'm talking about Dreamscape from 1984. Guys, if you can see in the background right here, the Snake Man. If you saw this movie in the 80s, or you saw this movie at a young age, you're going to remember the Snake Man, because that thing was scary as hell. If you've never seen this movie, I recommend checking this thing out, and put yourself in a position of being a kid around 10 years old checking this thing out, and you tell me that this thing wouldn't freak you out. All right, the next one was one that I saw when I was in my early 20s. And again, I was heavily into horror movies at that time. I went on a date. First night this opened, I checked it out, and man, this thing hit me pretty hard. This was a movie that I absolutely fell in love with when I saw it in the theater, because at that point, watching a lot of horror movies, things weren't really hitting me a certain way, right? I felt desensitized. But when this thing came out, I was very unfamiliar with this kind of horror, and it really hit me hard in the sense that I was kind of freaked out. And there's one specific scene in this, and you guys know what exactly I'm going to talk about when I show you, that really hits hard, and it still does to this day, and that is The Ring. So again, as you got this Blu-ray lenticular. Now, man, I fell in love with this movie. I was so unfamiliar with Asian horror at that point. I didn't know anything about Ringu, but seeing this movie, it was so different than anything I'd ever seen before. And that scene of her walking towards that television and then coming through the television, that sent shivers up and down my spine in that theater. I did not know what I was watching. The girl next to me was freaking out. This was super effective, and I just became such a big fan of this movie. Now, again, it's not one that I go back and watch a ton anymore. I used to watch this a lot when it hit DVD and stuff. I was just a huge fan of the movie, and I can't wait to go back and watch this because it's been probably 2 years since I've watched this one, but man, this is super effective. I don't know how it plays out now, but I'm telling you, the last couple times I've watched this, I can't get that chill sensation going up and down my spine out when I see that scene come up. I'm like, oh, here we go, because it was such a big effect on me. And again, at that point, I was an adult. I was in my early 20s when I saw this in the movie, heavily into horror, and for whatever reason, this thing really got to me. All right, my number 4 on my list is going to be a very similar situation as Ring. I saw this around the same time in the theater the first night. You know, I thought this was going to be a straight up horror type movie. It's not. It's got a little comedic elements to it. It's sci-fi. But there's something about this movie that really creeped me out, and that is Signs. Now, again, a lot of people are going to be like, what? Signs? Like, why is that on your list? You've got Texas Chainsaw over here. You've got The Exorcist. You've got Signs on your list. Yeah, there's something about it, and it's not the whole movie. It's that specific scene, and you know what I'm talking about at the birthday party where you see it on the news when the alien walks by. When they showed that in the theater, I had the exact same feeling I had when I saw Samora walking towards that television in the ring. There was chills that went up and down my whole body when I saw that alien walk by, and I thought to myself, holy shit, if aliens are coming, this is exactly the way it's going to happen. We're going to see a news story. Someone's going to have a little clip of it. Maybe not now in 2023 because everybody's got phones, but man, this just felt so real. And like I said before, found footage, possession, aliens, those 3 type of movies really, really affect me. And this one did as well. This is probably not going to be on everybody's list, but to me, this was something that I'll never, ever forget. All right, speaking of it shouldn't be on your list, I'm going to talk about something that I don't own a physical copy of. I'm assuming I have to probably buy all the seasons or the series because it's from a TV show. And I saw this at a very young age, and it was The Brady Bunch Goes to Hawaii. Now, there was a specific scene, that whole episode is just really creepy to me. They found like this little tiki doll, and if you touch it, it gave you bad luck. And this one specific scene of, I believe it was Peter, was sleeping and a tarantula was like crawling up his bed. I cannot tell you, for weeks, I would not have my feet. I would like pull my whole body up to the top of the bed and not have my feet like down low, thinking that like a tarantula was going to crawl in the bed and bite me. So that definitely affected me. Again, would it affect me now? No, probably not. I have not seen that in forever, but it is something that's been in my brain for so long. I mean, I was probably, I don't know, 6 maybe when I saw that for the first time, and I just remember it affecting me so much for all this time. So obviously it meant something to me. Obviously it affected me. So again, I had to put on this list because it's something I will never forget. Now let's keep on TV shows in this one. This I do have a physical copy of, and I'm going to tell you, I swear I saw this on TV when it aired. But I do know that they kind of pulled this as well. So I'm not sure if they showed it, then pulled it for reruns and stuff like that. But I'm going to tell you, this thing was stuck in my head for so long. I think I was in middle school or maybe like 5th grade or something when this series came out. But this was something that my brother, my dad, and I would do every Friday night. We had like a little routine. My mother would work late. My dad would take my brother and I to either Pizza Hut, Little Caesars, Taco Bell. We always had somewhere we went. More or less, it was kind of fast food, and that was kind of like a treat. And then after that, we'd go to the arcade, do some games at the mall, and then we'd go home and we'd all sit down together and watch this. And it was one of those shows that my dad actually wanted to watch with us. So a lot of times, my brother and I would watch something. My dad would kind of go downstairs and do his own thing, and we'd watch it together. But there was a few shows that my dad actually sat down and watched it with us. This was one, and when I saw this episode for the first time, I remember him looking at my brother and I and being like, I don't know if I should be showing you this. Your mother's going to kill me. I don't think he'd remember that, but I'm telling you, this thing stuck with me for so long. This episode of this show is scarier and freakier than almost every horror movie I've ever seen. And if you have not seen this, I recommend finding it and thinking in your head, oh my God, this came out in like 93 and how this could have affected people. And this was on TV as well. And that is X-Files, and the episode was called Home. So definitely one I highly recommend. Uncle Bill from Dead Pit and I have been talking about this episode for so long. We've been trying to get Wes to do a watch along. He's never seen this show. We're like, dude, you've got to check out Home because it was so effective. And again, I do know it was pulled, but for some reason, I know I saw this on TV. I know I did because I just remember being so freaked out and scared like about this episode as a little kid. And even watching it as an adult, it still is a very, very messed up episode. And I'm so shocked that this thing was even made and so ballsy of a topic. And it was violent and it was creepy. And man, I don't know what else to say about this, but this one has stuck with me forever. And I highly recommend you guys hunting this down if you've never seen it. All right, the next one was another Garrett is wicked young here. He's a little kid in 1985, so I was super young, and my mom used to tape things off of television that she'd want us to watch. And this was like a network event. It was a 2-night event, and I can remember everybody in the neighborhood was talking about it, like, oh, you're going to stay up and watch this? And it was Alice in Wonderland. It was a TV movie. I've talked about this on my channel before. We taped it, so it's something that my brother and I watched a lot growing up. And this was 1985, made-for-TV movie. There's so many Alice in Wonderlands out there. This is the one that I highly recommend. 1985, made-for-TV movie. It's got an all-star cast of tons of famous people in this. But this is creepy as hell. And I'm going to tell you the couple scenes that really freaked me out. And the first one was with the White Queen. She turned into like a goat. It was a really awkward scene. There's a vulture or a hawk that was trying to grab Alice, and you could see the camera view from its like claws and talons and stuff. But the biggest thing was when they introduced the Jabberwocky. Imagine being a kid, 1985. I was 4. I mean, that's my son's age. I was 4 years old when this thing came out, and we taped it off network television. So if you can only imagine what my brain must have been going through when that Jabberwocky hit the screen. And I'm telling you, even if you watch it now, it's still creepy. And think to yourself, wow, imagine if I was 4 and watching this thing. So Alice in Wonderland, a 1985 made-for-TV movie, super creepy as hell, super fun, highly recommended. I think you can get this super cheap on Amazon. I don't ever see this getting an upgrade. Because again, it was made for TV movie. I don't know how many people give a crap about this, but it had to make my list because the scenes in this, especially the Jabberwocky, has stuck with me my whole life. All right, we are almost done. We have 2 left. My number 8 is a newer movie. It's the newest movie on my list. And because the reason it made the list and things like Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw didn't was just because I only saw this a couple years ago when it came out, and nothing that's come out within the last 10 years I felt has affected me at all. Because again, watching horror, we become so desensitized. Nothing hits me like a lot of these movies I've talked about today have. And this was the first one that was able to do that in a real long time, probably since something like The Ring, and that is Hereditary. Now, Hereditary, super creepy movie. And, you know, there are certain scenes in this movie that people expect, oh, it must have been that scene. Oh, it must have been the scene with the daughter. No, it wasn't. The scenes that really get to me of this is the scenes in the darkness. The scenes where you think you're focusing on something and it's very dark, and then you see something moving in a corner, and then all of a sudden your eyes go to it and you're like, oh my God, there's somebody there. There's somebody in the room. There's somebody there. You can see a silhouette. You can see a slight movement. And that's the kind of horror that I really like is where your brain starts playing tricks on you. Not these like jump scares with like a loud banging music. I like the subtle, the quiet. You think you're alone, but there's someone else there. There's somebody standing there, but they're not saying a word. That's the stuff that really creeps me out. And again, such a great movie. One of my favorite horror movies of the last 20 years, no question. This is going to go down as a classic. And I remember seeing this in the theater with my brother, and he kind of felt the same way. He's like, wow, that was actually a really, really refreshing horror movie. And he's right. And I highly recommend this if you guys haven't checked out Hereditary. But this had to make my list just because, again, nothing in the last 20 years has made me feel that feeling, like I said, when I saw things like The Ring. And I'm sure this might be in other people's lists. So definitely keep your eyes open for Hereditary. All right, and the final one that's going to make my list, I saw this when I was young, probably younger than I should have been when I saw this for the first time, and that was Alien, the original Alien. I have a lot of memories of Alien. Now, as a young kid, I remember going into department stores and seeing action figures, board games, VHS tapes of the Alien. So this character here, the Alien, I remember seeing that image everywhere, and I can remember being so intrigued by it and being like, what is that? What's this board game here with this? Or what's this toy? And my mom be like, no, you can't look at that. And it just felt very forbidden at the time. So again, this movie was something I knew I wanted to check out as soon as I had access to, just because I remember that character kind of floating around when I was very, very young. And when I finally watched this movie, it might have been right off TV. Like I said, my mom used to let us watch anything we wanted if it was on cable, because we didn't have a lot of the pay channels. So if it hit TV, she in her head assumed it was just edited to bits. So like the things we probably should have been watching wouldn't even be on there. So that's where I watched a lot of horror movies for the first time, which again, come to find out now, a lot were cut. So when I saw them again, more of as an adult, and I bought them, there was all scenes in there that I felt were very new to me. So Alien was one that I remember taping. Now, the alien isn't what really bothers me here. It's this damn face hugger. That damn face hugger freaks me out. It scares the shit out of me. I hate it. You know, they've come out with like prop replicas, and I'm like, I'm not going anywhere near those things. The whole design of the thing, the whole idea of the thing, it just really creeps me out. The way it goes on your neck and it gets tighter, those long fingers and the thing that's going down your throat, the whole thing. I hate it. It scares the heck out of me. So yeah, Alien is my number 9 on my Rad 9 because that damn face hugger is something that's been stuck in my head since the day I saw this. All right, gang, I hope you like that. That was my Rad 9 movies that scared me. I had a couple of honorable mentions in there. Let me know down below what you thought of the new movies I named. Did any of these things freak you out as a kid? Is there anything on my list that you haven't seen? But I would say make your Rad 9 list down below in the comment section. But what I really want you to do is answer those questions and make your Rad 9 list on YouTube, or make your Rad 9 list on Instagram and tag myself at Born to Be Rad, Mel at My Killer Podcast, Justin at Movie Watch Daily, tag the Radpack. We're going to share everything that comes through like we did last time. And again, how do we make this bigger? How do we broaden the audience to get involved in this top 9 movies that scared me? Because to me, I'm actually more intrigued about this challenge than the first one, because again, I'm really curious what movies growing up scared you. Like I said, it doesn't have to be straight horror movies. I'm curious to find out if a cartoon freaked you out. I'm talking about the damn Brady Bunch over here. So how can we make this bigger than we did in the community challenge the first time? And what I think would be a great idea is I think that you guys should challenge other people. Throw out there, hey, I'm throwing out a challenge, and tag them in your video or in your post and say, I challenge you to tell me the 9 movies that freaked you out or scared you growing up. I think that's the best way to do it. Add that to your thing. Throw something out there and call somebody out. I think that'll just keep the ball rolling. And like I said, I'm really excited to see what freaked you guys out. This is Garrett at Born to Be Rad, and like always, stay